Yeah. Okay, so I'm not sure exactly the background that was given on me, but my name is Tom Wingert. I'm a LaSalle grad. I studied political science and economics here. Kind of did a little bit of my MBA and then stopped because I got busy. My role here kind of started out as an administrator, just managing a couple of departments, but evolved into doing a lot of external relations, strategic partnerships, specifically focused on social justice issues and in particular dealing with hunger in the local community. I was tasked with figuring out what to do with a project called Exploring Nutrition when I got here, which was a provost mandated project that essentially said we want to figure out what kind of relationship LaSalle University and the intellectual capital that we have at this university, be it students, be it faculty, whatever, can have on the local community vis-a-vis nutritional health, which is just a completely blanket statement. It's impossible to try to suss that down and figure out what exactly that means. So that was my job, is figuring that out. And what we started out doing is, develop an executive committee of folks around campus, faculty members predominantly, that were interested in this idea. And just kind of got together and talked about what we thought we might be able to do. How can we engage students in this problem of feeding hungry people or improving the nutritional health of our community? Came up with a number of projects, and my role was kind of, work to implement them in some way or another. But really there wasn't any systemic, process through which we were having a positive impact on the community. And we ran this one project where we did a food drive, a produce drive last year. One of the identified problem points in this neighborhood is that there's not enough access to produce or fresh or healthy foods. So one of the things that we did was, with students in the Leadership and Global Understanding program, raised over $5,000, bought 3,600 pounds of produce, and distributed produce to local grocery stores. And what food pantries. What food pantries normally give out are like canned goods, soups, high in MSG and salts. They're not nutritionally very sound. We decided to give some fresh produce and see if that does something. But that's really a one-off. I mean, that's not doing anything to longitudinally change the hunger landscape in Northwest Philadelphia. So what I did is basically started my own nonprofit organization out of this, where I figured that the faculty at this university weren't necessarily the experts in dealing with hunger issues. The experts in that field would be the people that have worked on it their entire careers. So your organizations like Philabundance, like Share Food Networks, the Food Trust, that list that John handed out it basically shows most of the folks that I've been working with. But I just did outreach to these folks and try to get some higher level meetings and talk about what it is that they do, talk about what LaSalle was trying to accomplish, see what information I could kind of download from them and then project through the lens of the university and our students to make this Exploring Nutrition project work. What this evolved into, and there's a number of reasons for this that I won't get into extensively, was something that became much more agile than lives in university space. It's a project that, once I started building these relationships with folks, there was a certain burden of expectation on me from these people that says, you are committed, Tom Wingert, to dealing with hunger in these neighborhoods. So what's happening? Now that I've had this meeting with you, I expect something to come out of this. So I'd be getting phone calls from folks at Philabundance or folks in the local community that had heard about the work that I'm doing, read like a Newsworks article or something like that, and saying what are you trying to accomplish here? And I said, well, I have absolutely no idea. I was basically trying to make myself better at my job, but now I started to start an organization, so I have to figure out what to do with that. So when I started thinking about what I should do with this network and how I could engage this network in dealing with hunger, I started looking at how food security is dealt with in Philadelphia and really around the country. And you have a lot of organizations that are doing a lot of work that feeds hungry people. But those programs are kind of all over the place. If you look at a map of Philadelphia, Philabundance will be running something over here in Northern Liberties, and something will be happening down in Southwest Philly with Share Food Networks or something, but there's not really any working together. So if all these programs where we're putting a ton of money into it, a ton of energy, and a ton of smart people, smart ideas, aren't working in the same kind of neighborhood, then how is that going to have any sort of impact on feeding Philadelphia? So what I wanted to do was try to work with all these organizations and bring them to one neighborhood, just with the idea that says, if we get everybody working in this one place, I sort of assume something will happen, hunger related. This thinking has some significant limitations in that, one, I'm not dealing with any of the educational or economic factors that have to deal with hunger. I'm basically just increasing reliance on interventions. So, just putting more interesting programming into one neighborhood that feeds hungry people, which is important work. But it's also creating a model of collaboration that doesn't necessarily exist in the nonprofit world. So I just threw out a whole lot of buzzwords. So if I'm saying stuff that doesn't make any sense, I talk about this all the time, and I can just kind of get in my own head a little bit. So please just stop me at any point. But anyway, that's really what this project is. And LaSalle is a founding partner of the Germantown Hunger Network. So, theoretically, the Exploring Nutrition Project, as it moves forward, will actively have a partnership in developing some of these ongoing projects. Some of which being, working with Philabundance and Share, which their primary service is providing food to food pantries on a monthly basis, to start changing the dates in which they get food to these food pantries. One of the reasons why that's important is people that are going to food pantries rely on SNAP benefits, so food stamps. Food stamps run out towards the end of the month, yet most of the food that Philabundance and Share are giving to food pantries is in the beginning of the month. So at the time when people really, really need this food, the food pantries don't have any food there. So I'm working with Philabundance and Share to start pushing that towards the end of the month. And there's a whole bunch of other stuff that's going on with this project as well, but that's just an example that kind of makes a lot of sense, I guess. What's interesting, and this is one of the things that I think is particularly relevant for this class, is I am leaving my role at LaSalle and kind of giving my organization, the Germantown Hunger Network, over to some of my community partners that have been working on this with me, because I've taken a job with an organization called Ignite Good, which is a organization that essentially trains millennial leaders in the nonprofit world with the power of public narrative, which is an enhanced storytelling mechanism, with the theory that the more people our age, that are equipped with this in this space, equipped with the power of public narrative, the better they are at building relationships with their community organizations, with whoever else that they'd be working with, and that would scale up the impact of the work that they're doing. But as a part of that, I think John mentioned this, I have a relationship with the Huffington Post, which is the parent organization of my new organization. So my boss is Ariana Huffington. And I've gotten an opportunity to do a lot of live blogging, and I have a platform through which I can write on the Huffington Post about things that I'm interested in, and things that I've been working on, and things that I hear about, and folks that I'm working with as part of my new network. What I'm doing is developing strategic partnerships for this organization. If I find something awesome that's going on in Wichita, I can kind of write about it. So I could talk a lot about what that experience is like, or what my view of young people getting involved in the blogosphere looks like, or talk about what working in the nonprofit world looks like, talk more about hunger, talk more about whatever. But I really want you guys to drive the conversation or something. How can I be helpful to you for what you're trying to get out of this class? How can I feed you content for which you can look at or something, that kind of thing. So go nuts, ask questions, or do whatever. Should you feel so inclined.
What drove you to make the switch? What made you switch to the Huffington Post from LaSalle?
Can we turn the camera on?
I was going to say, the camera's still running.
No, I'll answer frankly, I don't really care.
It is.
No, I
Go check.
I don't get paid enough, is a major one. And I'm not an academic, never will be, and I have always worked in the nonprofit sphere. So before I finished my undergrad at LaSalle, I was planning large-scale community service projects for an organization called City Year, and I've worked on a startup nonprofit in Israel and the West Bank, and I am very into things moving quickly and adapting to circumstances and being entrepreneurial, and that doesn't exist in university space. And also, a lot of the things that I've been asked to do in this role are just really hard to accomplish in a large bureaucracy. And that would be the case at LaSalle, that would be the case at another university, that would be the case if I were to work at like Deloitte or something. That's the case at the Huffington Post. I mean, my organization, Huffington Post, is a parent organization. I am part of a 3-person team that is now managing a national movement. It's a lot easier to get stuff done with 3 people than it is with 600 employees and 6,000 students. So, yeah, and where I'm at professionally as well, I'm 26 years old, and I'm at the point where I am defining myself professionally, and I've achieved a pretty high level of success really, really quickly. So I want to be able to ride that, and there wasn't the opportunity for me to do that at LaSalle.
So is there more flexibility with the new job?
Flexibility, I mean, I'm going to be living out of hotel rooms all over the country for the next 2 years, so yep. Yeah.
What made you decide to pick the Germantown area?
That's a good question. So with the Easter food drive, my methodology for developing community partnerships there was just go to churches and say, do you have a food pantry, and how can we provide you with food and stuff? And that was when I started realizing that the food pantries in this general vicinity, so Germantown, Logan, Olney, Worcester, the 4 neighborhoods that are around here, aren't connected to each other at all. So when I started with the Germantown Hunger Network as a project, I reached out to the civic sector, so nonprofits, community leaders, that kind of thing. And honestly, as an opportunist, the Germantown neighborhood was what reached back out to me the most and seemed most interested in this project. So I would reach out to folks in Logan or something, and some people were interested, but not really like full-fledged organizational commitment. Germantown also has a really well-developed citizen sector. So a lot of nonprofits are there, a lot of community organizations. And that's both a good and a bad thing. It's good in that I was getting a lot of feedback and I was invited to community meetings very quickly. But the way that they've developed themselves is that there's like 400 organizations all trying to do the same thing there. So it's really easy to get higher level meetings in Germantown. And they're organized in a way that a lot of other neighborhoods in Philadelphia are not. But really that's why. It was just the fastest route to go about doing things. And the more I learned about the community, the more I got really interested in it. So I'm happy that I landed with Germantown, with the historic sites and the people, and it's a really interesting dynamic. And like historically, that neighborhood feels so slighted by the rest of the city, where after the crack epidemic, all the money essentially fled to Chestnut Hill, and then the city was like, oh no, Northwest Philadelphia is taken care of. Look at Chestnut Hill, whereas like Germantown got completely forgotten about. So that's really why I started to be more and more interested in Germantown as I learned more about it. Yeah.
So the old job you were focused on just Germantown. The new one.
So the old job, I should also say the Germantown Hunger Network, and this would piss off my supervisor. Germantown was just, like I said, I got the best feedback from Germantown, and the Germantown Hunger Network is an organization that I founded that's separate from LaSalle. LaSalle is a partner, but it is an independent organization. So I have autonomy over where I operate and who I partner with. So the old job was focused on that with the hopes that I would expand this model to other neighborhoods around Philadelphia. But the old job at LaSalle has nothing to do on paper with anything that I've just talked about. Yeah.
So with the new one, is there any one specific focus or just the entire nation?
I am going, that's another good question. There's 2 potential models that I'm going to be dealing with. We have 20 cities identified that I'm going to go to in 2014. And what we're looking to do in those cities is really just tap into, like I said, like the nonprofit millennial leadership. We're also tossing around a model of going to cities like Philadelphia that have a lot of different universities that don't interface with each other, and trying to get networks of juniors and seniors that want to work in the social impact sector that are going to graduate and plan on staying in that city, and get them connected before they graduate. So we would then, if that's a model that we want to pursue, and this is all very early on and relying on funding and proposals and all that stuff, we would go to cities like Philadelphia, like Boston, like New York, Los Angeles, that have a lot of universities in them. Yep.
Easy question. When do you start the new?
Last November. Yeah, I've been working like 3 full-time jobs for the past however long, but I'm going to jump on full-time in February.
And are you still going to, I guess, ARC since it's the parent? Are you still going to do the Huffington Post, I guess? Yeah.
Yeah,
Great.
so we're figuring out exactly what we want to do with the impact site. Where I work with the Huffington Post, or where they would blog me, is through Huffington Post Impact. And Ariana is very interested in trying to increase the exposure for the work that my organization is doing. What that looks like exactly is unclear as of right now. And we're also developing a new relationship with a new person at the Huffington Post who will be like the HuffPo representative of my team. So, but yeah, we'll still be working with the Huffington Post and blogging a lot. We're also pursuing a relationship with Google and YouTube to try to have some sort of triumvirate there with lots of stuff. So, yeah. Yep.
When you began working on the Hunger Network, how much of your work had to be done online?
How do you mean?
Like, how much, as opposed to going in the field and contacting them over the phone or visiting them, how much, like, did you have to do a lot of blogging online or online?
So I did no blogging online. My first real online presence with the Germantown Hunger Network was when Newsworks wrote an article about it. And I had been working on it for maybe 4 or 5 months, and in the spirit of transparency, I was planning on forgetting about the project because I was working on other stuff. I also, in my time at LaSalle, I've done a lot of work with internationalization, and my primary focus has been with the Leadership and Global Understanding program. So there was this conference that I ran the last 2 weeks in July here that I was like living on campus with 13 different universities, 8 different countries, and it was just like exhausting. And then right after that happened, I like forgot that the Hunger Network was something that I was even working on, and the Newsworks published an article about it, and I started getting more phone calls about it, so I had to figure that out. But how much work I actually did online, a lot via email, just initial correspondence and normal connections. Like I'm a pretty good networker. So, I asked people to connect me to somebody, but as soon as that connection happened, I would very quickly try to schedule a face-to-face meeting. I think that my personal methodology is that that's a much better way to develop networks with folks, especially a public relationship that you want to work with the person. So a lot of it happened outside of the computer, which again kind of pissed off my boss, but oops. Just wasn't really at my desk ever, so there's that.
I asked you about one of the things in your, maybe for a political position, one of the things in your post on Huffington Post, you mentioned something about, it's kind of a parenthetical aside about while you're doing stuff with millennials and social justice and creating changes, you had an issue with the Occupy folks.
I did, and I do. Occupy for me, while I understand the spirit of it, I really feel like in function, that was a mess. It was disorganized, and a lot of people that felt some sort of blind rage, or the world wasn't kind of put at my feet. This is an opportunity for me to dress up like a zombie and ask people for money. I used to work in Boston. Like when I was at LaSalle, I still had a full-time job up in Boston where I just kind of work electronically or remotely. But I was up there for a meeting, I don't know, it was like November of 2010. It was right after Occupy really got going. And I was outside of South Station, which is right in the financial district, where Occupy is based in Boston. And this 30-something-year-old woman, kind of, dressed up like a zombie, comes up to me and says, oh, I'm with Occupy. Can I have some money for cigarettes? And I was furious with her for so many reasons. Like I had just taken, I'm a full-time student, I'm working full-time, I took my weekend, I came up here, I took meetings, I've been meeting. It's the end of the day, I've been working all day, I'm about to get on a train back to Philadelphia so I can make it back to my 8 a.m. class tomorrow. And you're going to assume that me, working essentially a full-time job, while also being a full-time student and traveling remotely as at that point I was maybe like 22, 23, assume that I'm going to approve of you being with Occupy because I'm a young person? Like, no, I am actually working to affect social change. You are, as far as I can tell, a zombie that's asking people for cigarettes because you don't have a job. So, I mean, but other things like that, like when those Harvard kids decided to sit out of class because Bush's old economic advisor was a part of this. I mean, these are kids that go to Harvard and their parents are paying, $500,000 just as an endowment, to get their kid into the school or something. It's crazy. But that's where my problems with the Occupy movement are, and with the millennial generation has been historically. But I've been changing over time to this, while I'm like networking and meeting other folks kind of like myself that are more entrepreneurial and work really, really hard to deal with entrenched social problems in interesting ways. And the amount of dedication and the amount of work that people are putting into stuff, and working in the nonprofit field is hard. I mean, you don't make a ton of money. You always have to be going after grants. You always have to be coming up with new ideas, like talking about why a good idea is a good idea. And to see other people do that is to a certain extent inspiring. So over the past 6 months or so, I've really changed my tack on how I feel about this generation. And that's just by nature of seeing other people working really, really hard, and not just like some. That answers your question.
Okay.